Audacity in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co-host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode, we are kind of doing like a revamp on one of our earliest episodes. Is it earliest or first episode?
Second, it's number 2.
Second. Wow. And we're at 70 something.
This should be 77, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. So hopefully this is better than our second episode.
God, I hope so. Maybe shorter. Like I remember we were going over like all of our episodes. We're like looking for new ideas or what we could revamp. We were going through some of our first episodes and we're like, oh my God, this was almost 2 hours long. Like, geez.
What did we even talk about?
Oh man, probably a lot of rambling. I bet. Thank you, Shane, for putting up with that when you did, but we fixed that, hopefully.
Yeah. And another crazy thing to think about is I've gotten pregnant and had a kid since our second episode.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Neat.
Also, I'm super proud of us because I don't know if I've said this before, but the fact is that we have not missed a week with an episode since we launched, if I remember correctly.
I think we missed one.
Okay.
I think it was just one. Yeah.
But like for a year and a half at this point, because we started December 2020. So all of 2021 and now half of 2022, like we've been really consistent and had an episode out every single Tuesday, which is freaking cool. So yeah, I think that's right because we're on pace because we had one bonus episode and one missed one. Yeah.
Yep. Well, super cool. So we're going to get into burnout, which I think is such a good topic for where we kind of are currently.
Yeah. Would you say so for yourself too?
Yes and no. Cause like, I'm really excited to get back into things, but I can't yet.
Yeah.
But I feel like maybe some other areas of burnout, like with work prior to getting pregnant. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So this is super relevant. Definitely for me lately. I feel like we haven't really done like a live episode in a while. Yeah. It's been at least like 5 or 6 weeks since we've like recorded just us two. Mm-hmm. And so in those 5 or 6 weeks, I've moved states. So I'm now in Statesville in North Carolina. And only the podcast listeners really get to know that. I pretty much tell everyone just the greater Charlotte area because we're like 40 minutes outside of Charlotte. And I don't really care for people to know what city I live in, but that's where we are. So you guys are special in that way. We moved last Wednesday. So it's been about a week and a half. And we are fairly settled in. Like we finally got our master bedroom set in today. So our mattress is no longer just sitting on the floor and we're just missing like a couple pieces in terms of like getting the house together. And like I had a full week of work in routine this week, which was amazing, minus today. Funny story. I went to the gym thinking I had all morning. 2 exercises in, I get a call that our furniture delivery is an hour and a half early at my house. So I had to leave. So I was very frustrated, but it was worth it for getting our delivery. But yeah, so with all that going on and the house update and stuff, that's been awesome. And it's been a huge blessing. And obviously I'm very, very happy to be in this position where I was able to move states and like be able to take a little bit of time off and adjust and then kind of get into a new swing of things. But the past couple months have like really, really tested me in the sense of like burnout and really like letting something give. I'm really, it's hard to say when it started, but I would pinpoint like beginning to really, really grow my business PCC as like the beginning of it. I've always joked that like I walk the line of burnout and that's just my life. And while I would like joke about that, that's like my funny line with people, like it is very true. Like there was never really a time where I took a break. Like when we started the podcast, I was still working an extra job that I didn't need at the lab at my university at the time, if you remember that, Christina. And then, yeah. And then like just kind of overextending myself always, pretty much since like high school. Like I've always kind of done that. And so I haven't really known anything else. And I've done a lot of like exploration and digging to like kind of like explore that more and like figure out why I have tendencies that way. But yeah, so it was kind of just one thing after the other, whether it was adding bodybuilding to the mix or another job or starting a business or then scaling a business. And scaling a business has been a lot unlike any other challenge that I've had. And, with that, I was like, well, I'm going to drop this other job and I'm going to focus only on this. And I'm not going to do my master's program so that I had the bandwidth to do that. But even then it was like very, very spread thin, and things went really, really well. I was able to just push boundaries and crush it in that sense. But ever since kind of August, September, October, that was when like Aaron came full time to the business. It was also when I started training in the mornings because I was like, I don't have any time during the day. Like I have to do it in the morning. Otherwise I won't. And that was really when it started to like, I started to feel it because training became much more of a chore. And that was really the area that I felt the burnout the most, was the training and lifting in the gym. And that had never happened before. I always remember like when we would have these conversations or we would record podcasts, I'd just be like, yeah, training's always great. Like it's always just the thing.
Well, training has always been a huge priority for you. I would say like top two, like up there with like nutrition, like those two never really like wavered for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and I was very regimented in that since I started this journey, like ever since I started like bodybuilding, really taking things seriously, like I never really wavered until like maybe 6 months ago. And so it was probably like October where I really started to like open up about these struggles to others and to social media. But it was like nutrition was just never really on point since that point. Like I would track my food, but I wouldn't hit my macros. I would plug everything in, but I'd be off by a considerable amount, under, over, whatever it was. And we just would eat out a lot more. I had to start outsourcing meal prep because I just couldn't, like, I didn't have any bandwidth to do that or motivation or will. So if Aaron didn't cook for me, it was meal prep or go out to eat. And more often than not, it ended up being going out to eat. And so, that became a convenience, and it pushed me to go kind of farther off track because eating out is just so easy to overeat and overconsume. I didn't gain a considerable amount of weight during this whole thing. Like I would say from end of summer to where I started like my mini cut, probably like 10 pounds. But it was the lack of feeling like myself with my training and my nutrition that really like got to me over time. And it bothered me to no end, because I couldn't get my shit together in a sense. Like I just couldn't do it. Like I kept saying, I'm going to like anybody that we work with, like, I'm going to start fresh next week. I'm going to get my shit together tomorrow. I'm going to like actually stick to this. And I feel so bad for my coach, my actual fitness coach, because I literally checked in every single week. That reminds me, I need to check in this week. But I would literally check in every single week and I'd be like, I'm going to do better this week. I'm going to crush it. I'm going to nail it. Like, this is just not who I am. I'm going to nail it. And I kept saying that and it didn't happen. It kept not happening. And it's ironic now because I'm doing well and I'm not checking in. But yeah, so that's been like literally the past 6 months at least that I've been struggling a lot with feeling like I'm failing myself, because again, and not to minimize, but also not to like over exaggerate, like none of these problems are really that bad. Like I'm not like where I was when I started. I'm not having like eating disorder issues, but at the same time, I'm not feeling like I was upholding my own standard. I also felt like I wasn't acting as the person that I am, or that I want to become. And that bothered me a lot. So it took just a lot of thinking and journaling and talking through it with a lot of people and a lot of like good soundboards and things to kind of come to some realizations that like ultimately up to this point, up to the couple of weeks before we moved, I do think I was very burnt out. I was sleeping until 9 or 10 in the morning and I couldn't get myself out of bed, just skipping workouts. 1 or 2 or 3 workouts per week was like, my regular for a couple, like probably 6 to 8 weeks. I could only really get to the gym if I had somebody waiting there for me. And I would just sleep for 10, 11, 12 hours on the weekends and still feel like, when you oversleep and you're like, that was too much. I wouldn't feel like that. I would feel like, okay, now I've caught up. And that's how I felt. And I've always been a sleeper. I tend to err more on the 8 to 9 hours per night side of the 7 to 9 recommended, but there is such thing as too much, and there is such thing as abnormal amounts of sleep. And I do think that the 12-hour nights were absolutely not normal, and more so a symptom of burnout. So yeah, that's I've turned a corner, like a true corner right now that we're settled into the new house and things. And I'll talk about that in a bit, but obviously I want Christina to get a word in and all of that. But yeah.
Well, it's fine because I'm sitting here just watching Colton, making sure he doesn't have an absolute meltdown, which is just kind of where I currently am at in my stage of life, trying to be a business owner with a 12-month or 12-week-old. I almost said 12-month-old, 12-week-old.
Yeah.
But I think another thing that you mentioned, like struggling with and struggling to open up with other people, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm making an assumption, but it's probably difficult to try to be a health and fitness coach and feel like your health and fitness is shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, again, it wasn't the worst thing. I was still
not like shit, but
yeah,
to your standards.
Yeah. Like I was eating fruits and vegetables, and, I'm still working out and all of that. But yeah, it just felt very odd to be back in the shoes of somebody who says they're going to do something and then doesn't. Because we work with a lot of people, both of us that struggle with that. So to kind of go back to that and be kind of humbled in a sense, was different. It was a good experience. I'm glad I went through it, but it was just very challenging to go through those like mental like hoops, like imposter syndrome in a way.
Right. And I think it's good to kind of like the way you're reframing those thoughts is like, yes, it's not who you want to be and who you like, we always talk about alignment, but at the same time, you're kind of like, but I went through it and it's kind of good because you have empathy for your clients and like, how that feels for them to want to be able to do something, but struggle and not be able to, and then kind of be like, okay, well, let's scale back. Like, because otherwise you sit there, and if you were to continue to say, I'm just going to restart, let's do it again on Monday. Why am I such a failure? Why is this so hard? I just need to grind. Like, I just need to do X, Y, Z, rather than just like scaling back, which is exactly what you did, and and make it a little bit more realistic. And so instead of feeling like a failure every single week, you're now feeling like, okay, I'm hitting my protocols. It's just scaled back a teeny bit more. And so it's way better to do that than do absolutely nothing and feel like a failure.
Yeah. Well, it's even funny that like, that's the solution that took me so long to get to as well, because I literally was like, no, I'm going to train 5 times per week. No, I'm going to track my macros every day, like, and do all these things. And I could never in that time frame pull myself out of my own shoes of like, I'm an authority, so I should be able to do this and I should be a professional, and just put myself back into the shoes of somebody who like, it's okay to scale back. The same stuff we tell you guys listening to the podcast, the same thing we tell our clients. Like, it was so hard for me to make that realization that, maybe it could have been different, but it was good to really be able to feel my body try to tell me something and then like actually figure out how to listen to it. So
Right. Yeah. It's like if you had been a client of yourself and you had checked in, you would have been like, hey, let's just scale back.
yeah, like 5 months ago at least.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd be like, hey, these are symptoms of burnout.
Yeah, but here we are.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of actually a good transition too. So to talk more about like what are the symptoms of burnout. So I think, and we talk about this with stress as well, because sometimes it's like you have stress in all these different areas of life and you don't really think that you're stressed. Colton is trying to chime in on the podcast. But kind of like how stress manifests itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of parallels to this conversation and the ones that we have about like stress and stress management, because that was kind of the direction that I was going to head as well, was like bandwidth in general is like how we figure this out in the long term. But yeah, so some symptoms of burnout. I mean, there's mental, there's physical. So, I actually know of a client who's kind of struggling with this as well. And they, it's really hard on them too, because we're very similar in that we're both very like go high achievers. But they in particular are struggling with what seems to be like physical symptoms of like the body overcompensating by being in like stress mode, like fight or flight in the sympathetic nervous system all the time. And now that has progressed to potentially a parasympathetic dominance. So, the body was worked up for so long, and we didn't do anything, or not didn't do anything, but didn't do enough to fix that, that now it's kind of overcompensating on the flip side, the parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system that kind of shuts the body down in a way. And so now they're feeling very like unmotivated to train, really like foggy and just groggy and like slow. And that is like a total like mind fuck for that person, because they were like, I have no idea what's going on with me and this feels awful. So I didn't get to that physical point, but that's some symptoms of burnout that you could potentially experience. Like feeling like overly anxious and tense is like kind of symptoms of sympathetic nervous system dominance. Or just feeling really slow, sluggish, like you can't really like get your muscle tone, like parasympathetic dominance would look like that. A lot of that is driven by hormonal shifts that can happen from chronic stress and eventually burnout. And I'll get a little sciencey on how this works, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Basically, this all comes back to, and I've explained this in another episode at some point, but the general adaptation syndrome model. And so basically this is when a stressor is introduced, our body goes into alarm mode, and then it sustains that alarm mode for however long we need to sustain it. So this is really good in the short term, acutely, like if we if we have a stressor in front of us and we, like, for example, resistance training, and it's a new stressor, we go into alarm mode. Our sympathetic nervous system deals with it by like pumping adrenaline and like making us like do the workout or lift the weight or whatever. And then after that, we don't hit the exhaustion point. We just adapt to it, and we continue to get stronger, or we continue to get more resilient to that stressor, right? So that's how it works acutely in a positive sense. And the hormones that drive that are cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine and epinephrine, and those things that put us into that fight or flight mode and allow us to handle stress. It's a really good thing. And stress in the short term and progressively overloaded stress, physically or mentally or bandwidth wise, is good for us. And we can adapt and we can handle more over time. But where this is bad is when we don't get out of that prolonged alarm phase. So when we have a stressor and we stay in that fight or flight, dealing with the stress alarm mode, eventually we hit exhaustion. And at that point, everything drops off. And that's when we start to see those symptoms of burnout. So truly, burnout is not just a matter of like, there's too much going on. There's too much going on for too long that we cannot sustain at some point. And everybody's point is different. I will say, like, you could look at this multiple ways for myself. You could say Marissa's been in her go phase since she was 16 years old, or you could say it's been since 6 months ago. Either way, it's a long time and it caught up. So that's kind of the physical side. And then the mental side, I would just say, is like brain fog and forgetting things and all of that.
Yeah. And I think like we talk about in all stress episodes, that it's good. Acute stress is good for your body, but it's the chronic stress that we really, really need to watch out for. And I think, like, again, to take it back, and like biologically, like we weren't really meant to have chronic stress. And, before it was just kind of like, oh no, a dinosaur is chasing me. Like that, like acute stress, or things like that. And like you weren't supposed to have this like chronic stress. And so I kind of like to think about it that way. It's like biologically it doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve us to be chronically stressed, and having that fight or flight response is supposed to help us, and is good in the short term, but not the long term. But yeah, I think it's really important to think about those symptoms. And like I've had some other clients, like it's kind of like that, like you're talking about the low energy, like maybe even like feeling a little bit depressed, or like not like themselves, sleeping in, or even like insomnia, because it can show the other way. And then weight loss or weight gain, like rapid. So that's another thing to look out for as well. Changes in your digestive system. Those are also really, really big symptoms to look out for. And so we always talk about like trying to solve things before jumping into like medication or something like that. So kind of taking a peek at like, okay, well, what is my mental health been like? What does my diet look like? Am I sleeping okay? Like if you're kind of like checking all the boxes and you still feel that way, it's like, okay, like what do I need to do? So we're going to talk about what we can do to kind of avoid getting to that point where we are burnt out. But I also would recommend, like, let's say you go through everything and you're taking care of all the things you need to take care of, but you're still not feeling great. Go ahead and get your hormones checked out. So highly, highly recommend that. So I know that sometimes providers are very weird about sometimes not scheduling a panel for you. Like they just won't. They're like, you look fine, you're healthy, you don't need one. So, which is just a whole other conversation to have. But if you do want to get your labs done, go to like LabCorp or something like that, and have someone read your labs for you. Cause that's again, another conversation, but sometimes they'll look at you and say you're in the normal range, even though you might be on the very, very low end of that normal range. And even though you might want to be optimal, they'll still say you're fine. So having someone who you feel like is in a position to read your labs and kind of go from there, because maybe there's an underlying issue that you're not aware of. And that's a small probably percentage of people who we're talking to right now, but it's always good to have kind of like a baseline to go back on.
Yeah. And I do actually, if anyone wants to reach out, just message me or email me or something. I do have a resource from a friend that, and I can send this to you as well, Christina, but it's like a third party company that does the lab testing. And then it's just very like trusted through some experts that I know that could help just like bridge that gap between like, okay, I want to get my labs done and I went to my doctor and they laughed at me. Where do I start? Because that's happened to me. I literally, one time I tried to get like an annual hormone panel and I was like, I just want to see everything because, well, at the time I was doing some research on myself, but still like I wanted to know something. And my practitioner literally like laughed in my face and she was like, why? And I was like, because I want to know these things and I'm going to pay money for it. So like, just like, let me. She almost didn't, which is so weird because usually you think like, oh, maybe like they'll just want to write the prescription so they can get paid for it.
Right.
So yeah, that was weird. But yeah, so if anyone wants to reach out about that, I do have a third party that I do trust in terms of like hormone testing that is reputable. So I can send that to anybody. But yeah, so kind of like what you can do proactively before you cross over that line. And like I said, I don't think I fell over that edge too hard. Like I was sleeping in a lot and I felt unproductive and foggy, but I didn't have the the stuff beyond that, the parasympathetic dominance or sympathetic dominance, I don't think. So yeah, so basically, and it's interesting because on our list we have exercise and nutrition. That was actually like what needed to give for me. But things that we recommend are general health and wellness things like providing your body with good nutrition, with regular exercise that you enjoy, that's not too much of a burden for you. I think that's really where that line was for me. Self-care in any shape or form of things that help you relax and feel like you're taking care of yourself. And something that I've been working on a lot is just mindfulness, meditation, journaling, and really, really blocking my days for productivity, and allowing myself breaks in that. That's something new, but I actually reconfigured my whole schedule this week, and I have an hour break in the middle of the day. I take off 2 hours for the commute to and from the gym and whatever I need to do pre or post gym for that, a couple times per week, and just leaving space. And also on my new schedule, I'm not waking up too early, but but yeah, so like working with your body, working with your mind to like actually open up bandwidth. That's really like where I think the conversation came down to for myself was like, I have a certain amount of bandwidth. It might be a very large amount of bandwidth. I pride myself on being a person that can handle a lot. But I think for people like myself, and I mean, Christina, if you feel like you're the same way too, like not using that as a crutch, because like that's something, it's like, oh, I can handle it. I can do everything. I'm Superwoman, and like just put it on my plate. But really being able to like outsource what I needed to outsource, make space for what I needed to make space for. And for me, that was actually taking pressure off of training and nutrition for a while too. I actually stopped tracking my macros for probably a good 2 months or so. I don't really know if I ever said that on the podcast, but I took about 2 months off from any sort of logging. And it was actually kind of difficult to get back into tracking, just like the remembering part.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like took time off of that and scaled back to 3 days a week at the gym and started playing more volleyball with friends, and just exercise in more ways that I enjoyed. So yeah, that's kind of what I did, but a lot of the things that we recommend for that.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of like, what has to give? Like
Yeah.
what can I take off my plate? What can I outsource? And so I think that's probably one of the biggest areas that you and I have grown over the past like year and a half,
Yeah.
is because we are so similar. We have the mindset of I can just do it myself. Like I'll take care of it. Like it's very difficult for us to say, hey, I need help. Like I can't do this by myself. Like we try to do everything. We try to run our business. We try to do all the coaching. We try to do all the marketing. We try to do everything. And then with our house, it's like, I want to do everything. I want to do all the laundry. I want to do all the cooking. I want to do all the meal prep. Like, feeling like we should be able to do it all. And like that, I feel like has been the biggest change. And part of it is pride. And then the other part of me is, well, if I can do it, why would I pay someone else to do it for me?
Yeah. Or ask
Like,
someone to do it for you. Yeah.
right. And so I think of just something as simple as like cleaning the house. Like, obviously, I can clean the house. Like, that is not an issue. And sometimes I enjoy doing it, but like, why shouldn't I pay someone else to do it if I have all these different areas that need my attention and probably need my attention more? So just like small things like that, I think like really, really add up in the long run.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, like the house cleaner thing, because we actually had on one of our like client calls, I'm pretty sure she listens to the podcast, and I think that's how she like found coaching with us in the first place. But she she was basically like, I think she either got or was considering getting a house cleaner. And she was like grappling with that on the call. She was like, I just like, I don't know how I feel about that. Right. Oh, she got one because she was like, I'm on my way home and like everything's clean and I didn't do any of it. And it feels
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And so one way that I kind of helped her reframe that, because that's something I did outsource, I need to find one in North Carolina because Aaron or I are not going to do it at this point. And like meal prep services, that's another thing that I've like regularly outsourced now at this point. And I actually did my first like meal prep yesterday that I've done in months, and it's been good. So like I said, I have bandwidth back, but for a while outsourcing cleaning, outsourcing meal prep has been a game changer. And a way that I reframe that, because again, it's like, why wouldn't I do it if I could do it for cheaper? Or why wouldn't I do it if like I could just do it myself or do it better, right? But ultimately, what you have to think about with that is if that is a luxury you can afford, right? Because it's
Right.
always like, of course, it has to fit in your means, but if that is something that you can't afford, think about how much more of what is truly a priority you can do. I use the example with her because she's a mom of multiple kids. Like, what it's cleaning her house is taking away from time she can spend with them, right? Meal prepping for herself, maybe that's something that is taking away time from her being able to spend time with her kids. But like, she has so many roles and she's a career driven woman, she's a mom, and like, those are things that they're not necessarily below her. Like nothing is below anybody, but at the end of the day, like it's not the top priority, but it still has to get done. So how can outsourcing something or asking for help, maybe it's just asking your significant other or somebody that you live with, your roommate, to help you with something, even if they don't do it 100%, if they can do it 75% of the way that you would do it, it's worth asking for help and getting someone else to do it, because we only have so much bandwidth. And I think a lot of the people that listen to this podcast tend to stretch that pretty far.
Yeah. Yep. That is 100% me. And it took me a long time to be able to ask my spouse because, again, I felt like I had this complex of I am superwoman and I should be able to do everything. And asking for help was a sign of weakness. So that was really big and something now where I'm able to just kind of like just ask and it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I also, and I don't know if I've admitted this either on the podcast. I just feel like it's been freaking forever since we've like been able to sit down, just the two of us, and do like an updates podcast.
Yeah. Well, this is
But
why our podcasts are 2 hours long.
yeah. But I actually started therapy for probably 6 weeks, because I've had mixed feelings about therapy as a whole. Not for anyone else. For anyone else, I was like, yeah, do it. That's great. But for myself, I was like, no, I don't need that. It's dumb. So kind of a cognitive dissonance there, if you will, because like I know how helpful it can be for people. I just like considered myself exempt from that group. And maybe that's an ego problem, but I it wasn't the most helpful because I kept a number of walls up throughout the whole process. So now that I'm in a new state, because if you don't know, therapists are licensed by state, so you have to do it that way. But now that I'm in a new state, I actually want to jump back in with those walls down and see what comes from it, which is kind of terrifying in a way. But that's another way of asking for help, that you really don't know what kind of freedom and bandwidth that you can open up in yourself by realizing like what walls you have up, what things you're like tense about or have been avoiding talking about, or stress and chronic stress can arise from like not having that hard conversation that you need to have that's weighing on you, right? So like all of those things can get uplifted through something like talking to a good friend or to a third party that would allow you to like alleviate that stress from your life.
Yeah. And I think that it's also really great to have someone like a third party like be able to give you suggestions. Like obviously it's different when you talk to like your mom or your best friend or your
Yeah.
spouse because they obviously have a lot of bias. So having someone who can sit there and ask you the tough questions without really having that buy-in and bias is really, really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, that can definitely be a source of, and the other thing too is that even if you maybe you're treading the line of burnout and you don't know where the heck to start, and this podcast is obviously a step in the right direction, but like, what if you just have no idea what needs to give? Like sometimes that self-reflection, whether it comes through journaling or meditation or seeing that third party, is so invaluable because then you just figure out what's going to work for you, like what does need to give and how do you make that adjustment, right? Because for myself, the realization was as much as training nutrition has been such a priority over the past 5 or 6 years, can it be the priority that it was now with the other things that actually top that in my priorities list? The answer is no. So we went from 5 days a week training to 3. I was already doing 3, but I was just feeling like a failure. Now I'm doing 3 and I'm feeling successful.
Yeah. And I think that's really great because of where I currently am. And I used to kind of think like, oh, everyone's got the same 24 hours and da da da
Yeah.
da da. And like kids shouldn't be an excuse. And it's like, I get it. Like, I see how, like, it's just like, oh, well, just work out when the baby's napping or just work out when the kids are, whatever. And it's like, no, that's just not like super realistic. So, I definitely empathize with that now more so than I ever have. And I like I mentioned earlier, like I am wanting to get back into workouts and I'm currently not able to because of where I am with my rehab postpartum. So it is a little different because I am like wanting to really get back to that. But I also know like I'm not going to be able to do 6 workouts a week for like 3 hours. I'm not going to be able to go to the gym because first of all, like I can't leave my baby for too long because I were exclusively breastfeeding and like babies are on a maximum 3 hour limit. So I don't have that luxury of driving to the gym, like working out, coming home. And fun fact, like I learned that you actually shouldn't feed directly after a workout because of the lactic acid that builds up
Oh
is
yeah.
dispensed in breast milk. So your breast milk can actually taste sour. So fun fact of the day. Uh, but I just don't have that luxury anymore. And so like I need to do home gym workouts. And while they're not my favorite, like I need to adapt. And like that's what I need to do. Like I'm still going on walks, like that's still my priority to get movement in every single day. Like that's like a non-negotiable to get my steps up because that's something that I'm able to do and I'm able to do with him and he enjoys being outside. Um, but I've talked to, different moms and they're like, wow, like I'm so jealous that your baby like likes being carried. Mine just screams their head off the
Oh
entire
wow.
time. And like it's just different things like that. Like it's, temperament of your kid and like environment, like where are you living? Like what is the the temperature out and just like small little things that have just given me just a much bigger insight into what people struggle with. But just kind of coming to that realization that like while I do really love fitness and it is obviously and will always be a big part of my life, it's just not going to take priority like it did before. And like my kid is my number one priority. And like, and I'm okay with that. And I think that's been a really big mental shift for me, like feeling like it's okay that fitness isn't my world right now and to just be like it's okay if I only only if I lift 2 to 3 days a week and that is okay. And like again, same thing, like we have clients that make progress on 2 to 3 days a week, 30-minute workouts because they're taking care of all the other stuff too. And so just being okay with that.
Yeah. And I think the important part about what we've both said is that in no way are we saying nutrition and exercise is not a priority. It is. It's just not the priority that it used to be, where like it was over everything else. There's just other stuff that comes first. And, for me, that was moving and business and like, honestly, just like recovery from all the things. But like, and for you, it's taking and spending that time with your child and like also running a business and staying sane. And then also like kind of like getting movement in, which is a huge, like just accomplishment, because you think about the people, like you said, that maybe their baby can't go outside. So maybe they can't go on walks. I just talked to somebody literally before this call where we record this podcast that someone, she couldn't walk outside in the mornings or afternoons anymore because she lives in Phoenix, Arizona, where it's like 90 degrees at 8 a.m. Like,
Yep.
Sorry, nope. So just like understanding that like it can still be a priority for you and should still be a priority for you to take care of your body and your health. But if you are somebody who frequently treads that line of burnout, to understand when things need to give, and that might mean applications for our fitness clients or people who might be listening. Like it might mean not doing that fat loss phase like you thought you should. It might mean, not working out 5 times per week. It might mean working out 2 or 3. And thankfully for myself, I feel like as soon as I made the paradigm shift of lifting 3 times a week, my motivation went up a lot. I finally felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I was able to kind of mentally recommit to nutrition for some reason. Like it was like the bandwidth just like moved itself over to like, instead of worrying about the fact that I was missing my workouts, I could like actually remember to like track a thing in my my app. So yeah, like to kind of bring it full circle, like since these realizations, since having those symptoms of burnout and thankfully not letting it go farther than it did, like I said, I've turned a very good corner. I've been really consistent with my nutrition the past few weeks. I've lost like 5 or 6 pounds or so just from like cleaning it up. Feel a lot more like myself. I'm making taking breaks during the workday a priority and going outside because it's beautiful out. And just feeling a lot, like I said, a lot more like myself. And so it's could be something as simple as that, right? For me, it was literally don't train 5 times, train 3. Everything else kind of fell into place once I did that. You're gonna say something?
Yeah, I do. Cause I think it's so interesting, right? Because we always talk about this as women, we always want to do more, right? Oh, I'm gaining weight or I'm not happy with where I am. So I need to do more workouts. I need to eat less. Like I need to do more. But for you, scaling back allowed you to relax and then have that bandwidth for nutrition. So I'm sure it was a combination, right, of just kind of getting a little bit back on track with nutrition, but also just like lowering stress, and how you would think going to the gym 5 times a week is better than 3 and you would see more results, but it was actually the opposite. It was scaling back, and that allowed you to de-stress and do what you needed to do in other areas of your life. So I think that's really important to note.
Yeah. It's been so like a couple of my clients that I still work with have like switched as well, like taken back a day from their training since I've made the shift and talked about it. And they're like, now they're like, I'm going to take the pressure off myself too. And I was like, yes, like you can do that. And it's amazing.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, we always talk about being in phases in our life. And so right now, Marissa and I are saying like, Marissa's like, I'm in this phase of growth with my business, and that's taking priority. And so other areas of my life need to scale back so I don't burn out. And same thing kind of like with me. It's like, yes, I'm in this phase of having a newborn and it's incredible and it's amazing. And so therefore I want to enjoy that. And that is my priority. So other areas need to scale back. So it's not going to be like this forever. Like eventually my kids will get older and I will, turn the dial back up and probably get back into the gym more. So it just because you need to scale back now doesn't mean that that's how it's going to be forever.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, we kind of maybe paint this picture of like finding our balance with our routines because I was able to scale back on this and allowed me to have that quote unquote balance. Like, but I would say too, like phases of life are going to be varied between balanced and unbalanced as well. And I would even say that probably both of us right now have a little bit less balance total. Like we're both, still a little stretched thin. And that's okay. So I think the ultimate goal of this is not necessarily to always just achieve the perfect balance in your
Right.
life and have this perfect work-life balance or whatever, right? Like it's just accepting that the phase that you're in and then working within those constraints kind of to optimize that for your performance, your energy, your quality of life as much as possible. But there are going to be people and situations and times in our lives and your lives that are going to just be incredibly unbalanced. I know people that work 3 jobs. I know people that do so much, probably so much more than we're doing. And like somehow they handle it and they have to, tip the scales. Maybe exercise takes a complete backseat for them to be able to, provide for their families or whatnot. And so I think it's just keeping a perspective of like, there will come times where like maybe you get all this time off and you're relaxed and you're balanced. That's great. It's not necessarily where we're at, but we're working within those constraints to like have the best quality of life possible, health and fitness wise as well, to like be as balanced as possible, I guess, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, like if you think about it, like, if you're in college and you have finals week, right? Like that's not going to be balanced. Like you're going to be cramming, you're going to be staying up late, like you might eat out a little bit more than normal, you might not have to go to the gym, things like that. It's like, yeah, it's not going to be balanced. Or at work when you have a deadline, or if like my husband used to be an accountant, like he had busy season and that was like
Yeah.
an area where he was like he couldn't do anything else other than work. And like you're going to have periods and phases like that, and that's okay. But just kind of recognizing that, like, hey, this is just like a short term phase. I kind of need to get through it, and then I'm going to be back to like my normal. But what happens, I think what we're trying to say is like if you live in that state of constant like I don't have anything left to give, and you stay that way for long periods of time, that's when it becomes an issue.
Yeah. And I've seen people do that. And it takes most people a long time to realize that something does need to give. And so I would just encourage, if you're listening to this, kind of to kind of put the cherry on top of things today, take an inventory of the stuff that you're balancing and what's in your life and what kind of things are on your plate. And really analyze how you're feeling. Is it truly normal? Do you feel like yourself? Are you in a good space, like where you have a good quality of life? Or is there that walking the line of burnout? Are you feeling yourself tip over the edge, or have you already tipped over the edge? If so, there's things that you can do about it. I think a lot of people tend to think that they're stuck in something like that. And that's not necessarily the case. There's always something you can do. And I think for me, it was realizing that training 5 times a week doesn't need to be a non-negotiable. And it took a while to like break that paradigm. It really did. So whatever it is, there might be something holding you back from letting something give that you feel like shouldn't. And I think that there's a healthy way to figure that out for yourself.
Yeah. So I think that's really important, is kind of like if you are struggling from burnout or you're trying to not get to that point, like really figure out like what needs to be a priority. And then also kind of like what are the things that I'm telling myself, like are they true? Like you were saying, like 5 days a week is a non-negotiable, so I can't move that. Like what needs to give? But like kind of reworking and reframing some beliefs that you have. So
Yeah.
mindfulness and is one of the most I guess, important, and self-care. And of course, we we talk about how it doesn't need to be like, these luxurious vacations or bath bombs or, face masks. Like that's not necessarily what self-care has to look like. It absolutely can if that's for you, but maybe that looks like, journaling, or maybe taking some time to read,
Or
or
sitting in the sun.
yeah, yeah, whatever it might be, that helps you kind of like recharge and refresh. And then sleep practices, like we cannot harp on that enough. And we've talked about so many different episodes. And I don't know, do we have an episode dedicated to solely to sleep?
I'm not sure. We probably should add that to the list.
Yeah, we did a whole like mind dump yesterday for episodes. So we're in a really good spot for you guys. We have some really good ones coming up. But yeah, that would be a really good one to reference, because we do send these to our clients all the time. So I think that'd be really good. So we won't go too in depth for that, but it is really important to make sure you're taking care of your sleep. And I would absolutely love if I was one of those people that could operate on like 5 to 6 hours of
Same.
sleep. I would love that. Just because, that's how we are. We'd love to have more time. But if you do need that like 8 hours, then like you need to get it and make sure you're getting quality too. And then again, we have talked about scaling back with nutrition and exercise, but it is really, really important for self-care. So, with the other end, everything is a dichotomy. Like we don't want to say, well, I can't do 5, so I'm just going to scale back to 3. And someone's thinking, well, like, what if I scale back to none? Like, what if I do nothing? That's going to take you into the opposite direction. If you're not prioritizing movement and you're
Yeah.
not eating good quality food, like you're probably going to feel even worse than you do now. So making sure that you are still eating like good food and you are still, prioritizing movement in some way or another. Like you have
Yeah.
something to say.
Yeah, no, it's just that it's all relative, right? Like me scaling back was like going from pretty neurotic to like semi-neurotic, like and less time in the gym. But for somebody who maybe is struggling with burnout and they have nothing in place, like no nutrition habits made, like no exercise, that's where introducing that and actually carving out time for it will probably help push you in the right direction rather than hurt. Obviously, making that time is challenging, but maybe that's, shutting off your phone at a particular time at night so you can sleep better and get a workout in the morning, right? Like those are kind of the things that we work with clients on. But yeah, it's definitely like while I'm talking about scaling back, adding exercise and nutrition to your routine, if that's not a part of it, is probably going to help you with burnout rather than hurt. So, very individual example there.
Yeah. Or maybe just kind of like tweaking what it looks like, or maybe like
Yeah.
just kind of adjusting what it looks like in your schedule. I recently had a client who told me she's like always been that person where she sleeps until like the absolute last minute before she needs to get up and start doing things, which I 100% relate because I used to be that way too.
Yeah.
And I was telling her how like, and it's so funny, right? Because I do things during prep, and then because I don't have to do them anymore, because my schedule opens up, like I fall out of that habit. But I loved waking up early and doing fasted cardio. And it sounds so like weird. And again, I'm not recommending that you wake up and like slam a bunch of caffeine and do an hour of cardio, because that's probably not going to be really great for your body. But like it was just like the habit of like going to work after doing something difficult and hard and fighting the like urge to sleep in and do what's comfortable, like not getting out of my super comfy warm bed. But I just felt so much better during the day. Like I felt like I had more energy. I just felt like I accomplished. And that just fed into all these different areas of my life. And so she recently started doing this, and she's like, wow, I actually feel like I have more time in the day to get stuff done. I feel better. I feel more energized. Like I've never been a morning person, but I love the way I feel when I do this. And she was, before felt like she didn't have time. And now she feels like she's almost like created more time for herself. And she's like, I'm going to bed earlier. Like I'm getting up earlier. Like she's like, this is great. This is like what I want to do now. So maybe just like adjusting or like adding something in, like we were saying, can be like a big thing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like same thing with why I do my cold showers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't been able to get myself to do those.
It's the same idea. It's just doing something hard every morning that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
It stinks, but no, it's a good wake up every morning.
Yeah. I was focused on recovery and healing. So I was taking very, very warm showers to help with like steam and everything. But now I feel like I'm at a point where I could probably start doing those. But yeah, so that's, just kind of figure out what works for you and also like prioritizing. So I think that's really important. So like, if you feel like you're burnt out, but you're spending like 1 to 2 hours a day on social media, like, maybe that goes to the end of the day. And like, if you have time, you can, putz around on Instagram, but doing the things that you need to do early in the day. And you might feel like you have a little bit more time to do other things. And of course, seeking help and assistance if you need it, which I know we spent a little bit of time on in the earlier part of the podcast in the episode, but it could be, something as maybe not simple. I don't think I want to use that phrase, but if it's just like asking a spouse or family member or friend for help versus like actually seeking like professional help, I think both of those things are something that we would absolutely recommend doing if you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Are we done? Did we finish an
I
episode
don't have
under an
anything
hour?
else.
Wow, look at us.
Go us. For
Look
a
at
second, I
us.
thought we were going to be done at like 30 minutes, and then I realized I was lying to myself, but here we are.
Yeah, I know. Maybe like when we're like 170 something, we'll get better at these episodes, guys. Well, awesome. If you're still listening, we appreciate you. And we hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. You can find both of us on Instagram. You can find me at Christy Lynn Fit, and Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope to see you back next week.